Welcome to the 2 Acre Homestead Podcast Shorts. During November and December 2022, we're presenting a shorter form of our podcast. So let's get started. Welcome back. Well, today we're talking about keeping records on the homestead and why this is so important. But first, Lisa, what have you been up to?
Well, this week we've been kind of busy with the kids, actually, dealing with some health issues, just trying to get them all settled in with their health and trying to just kind of work out some things with our oldest son because we're going to be starting school soon. So we're getting ready for that. We're way ahead of the game. He doesn't start until next year, but we're starting to look at, what we want to do there. And then I've also been stuck in redesigning our main garden. So I want to give it a little bit of a facelift because we've expanded it. We've made it a little bit wider than what it was before. And so I'm just trying to redesign some things, figure out where we want the new beds to go because I'm sold on, I just want to do just raised bed gardens. I think it's easier. We have so many critters. and issues with the soil here, and time is of the essence. So it's just easier for us to do raised bed gardening right now than trying to work with the native soil. We've found that the native soil here is really bad. It's going to take a couple of years to recondition the soil and to get it back to where you can grow properly. So where we do have the native soil, we do have our perennials, and then where we're growing our annuals will be all raised beds.
But where we were before, you had experience with that, right? It happens when the previous people don't plant, right? It's dead soil.
But we had time to recondition that soil at that time because we didn't have kids when we first moved there.
Right.
But now we have children and, things are expensive. So, time is of the essence.
Right.
So it's better to just do the raised beds when you want to get stuck in really good, really quick, grow something the upcoming gardening season. So,
and we're like, I think some other people, right, where we want to do 50 things at once when we we moved here, we wanted to do all these things and especially getting the gardens going.
And every homesteader does that. And we all, as much as we preach, try to wait for a year, learn your land, learn everything. That is what you should do. But when you're facing inflation and, just everything coming at you at one time, you just got to get in and get it done. So
there you go.
And so what have you been up to?
Well, let's see. So worked on correcting a major mistake I made. So I set up an area to get the hay out there in the field area closer to where we have our goats. Got it off the ground, put it on pallets. Awesome. But then I slacked off and I didn't cover it. And we had a little bit of light rain coming in, so good thing this morning got out there and had extra tarps, good thing, and put those over that. So good thing to learn from, right? You got to make sure when you do things like that, you got to take care of it right away because sometimes weather doesn't cooperate. Good thing is being in the desert here in the Southwest, it's going to dry out quickly. But the rain did start. We scrambled to get it covered. So we've got that.
And it's good that we had those extra tarps.
Yeah.
when you have a homestead, there are just some things you need extras of. Tarps is always one of them.
And, a learning experience from that too is I did have extra tarps at one point. And then I think we were doing processing something. And anyway, the extra tarps I had got used. So then I didn't have extra tarps. So we had to go out one time and, get some extras. So sometimes your extras become, they just vanish, right?
Exactly.
What do you say? One is none.
Yep.
Two is
none.
one.
And I think when you run a homestead, if one is none, 10 is one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learn these things, right?
You learn as you go.
So that's one thing. And then finishing house painting, some of it's going to have to wait, because we have fascia boards that just had not been addressed. We've been in this property a year, and they just need to be replaced, right? So one of the challenges that I found is I've called at least a dozen places, framers and general contractors and whatnot, and they tell me they don't want to come to this area. But what is it? Is it really they don't service this area, or they don't want to do the work? I don't know. But the point is I'm at that point where I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. Yeah. And so now getting ready to do that means buying a new miter saw and a larger table stand to do that work, because these boards are, bigger. But I always like to say, in a project like that, I'd like to at least get one new tool, right? So,
it's always a new tool.
Yeah. But anyways, so that, and then of course, when that's done, then the rest of the painting will wrap up. But I'm glad we're doing that now, because I don't want to be doing this in the 90-degree weather.
No.
That is not fun.
No.
So, but that's what I've been up to. So
fun stuff. Well, the other thing that we've been up to is we did our first round of rabbit breeding. So we were going to start our rabbit breeding last month, in November. And because some of our does, half of our does this is going to be their first year. We just felt that it was better just to wait just a little bit. So we kept putting our new does with the male, with one of our bucks. And, we couldn't get the lift, and I didn't want to force that this time around, or the first time around in November. But this time around, here we are in December, we need to get down to business. So we went ahead and got our does to lift. And if you want to know what we're talking about, good resource is YouTube. We've also had a podcast where we interviewed Bobby Jimenez from the Rabbitry Center. Go ahead and catch that episode. We'll put a link to it in the show notes below. But, and he talks about how to do that. And that's exactly what we did. Got our new does to lift. So we, for 3 days in a row, we were breeding, all of our does but one. And that she seems to be having some health issues. So super excited, because then that means, counting forward, that means probably in March we'll be able to start processing our rabbits. So we'll be able to replenish what we've left out, what we've eaten out of the freezer. By the time March comes, we'll be able to replenish that. So super excited for that.
Awesome. So let's get on topic this week, and we're talking about record keeping.
Oh, it's so exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
But very necessary.
Very. Yeah, it is. It's important to keep the records on your homestead. And there's just a host of reasons why you want to do that. Some of the reasons why you want to do it is because it helps you to prevent things like, we were just talking about breeding our rabbits. If you're doing what's called line breeding, you may have, a family of rabbits that you're breeding, and you need to know who's bred to who, especially if you are breeding them to sell. You need to keep track of that. You need to stay on top of who got sick with what. And even in the plant kingdom, what diseases that you faced in the gardens. And, on the topic of gardens, knowing when to plant and when to harvest. Like in our area, even though we are in zone 8A, our specific area where we're at is more like a zone 7A, 7B, because of just this particular area, it has its own microclimate. So keeping good records of what plant does well, when should you plant, the seeds, when should you put out your seedlings, keeping track of all of that is super important.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to build a homestead from the ground up? Or maybe you're looking to build an off-grid dream home, a vacation home, or maybe just a piece of land to call your own. Visit yourcheapland.com to buy rural land in the wide open spaces of southwestern United States. When you visit yourcheapland.com, they're here to help you, and with their help, you can do this. You can take your dream of owning land and make it a reality. Most down payments are only $294, including the document fee. Remember, everyone qualifies for financing at yourcheapland.com. Head on over to yourcheapland.com and start making those dreams come true. And now, back to our podcast.
Good. And then in the case of livestock, the farm, the homestead should keep records of bloodlines, pests, diseases, feed types, consumption, what the animals are eating, when, how much. That helps too for budgeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when keeping records on livestock, some of the things you might want to also make note of are the dam and the sire and any lineage you may have.
Mm-hmm.
When the animal was bred, the date of birth, the number born alive and mortality rate. And, when thinking about that, imagine you're on the end where you're going out to get livestock, and imagine you're wanting to know some of those things. Wouldn't it be nice if that other person, the person that has the animals you're thinking of purchasing, bringing to your homestead to, amend your flock or amend your, your livestock. Imagine if they had those records well kept, and that helped you to be able to know, okay, well, this goat, for example, was bred, and we know that on such a date, we're going to have babies, something like that, right? So it's good for you to have it too, because disease or other things, feed, you might see a trend. Maybe what if the animals are eating less? That can point to some things. So they can help you as well, keeping those records for your animals as well.
And then knowing what records you want to keep, like especially with your livestock, will help you when you go to buy livestock, because then you can, to ask those questions, because I can't tell you how many times we've bought, animals, and, we buy them, and then it's like, oh, this has happened before, where it's like, oh, I forgot to ask when was this animal born? When was this animal exposed to a male? Was there any breeding? Are the eggs fertile at this point? Was the hen exposed to a rooster? When was this hen, when was she born? Has this hen hatched chicks before? Was she, was she hatched by a hen or was she an incubator chicken? That's an interesting question to ask if you're buying chickens, because a lot of people are offloading or they're downsizing their flocks. And if you're interested in buying chickens right now, that's a good thing to ask. You want to ask that. Was this chicken hatched by an incubator or was she hatched by a hen? The reason why you want to ask that question is you will know that if you've got a rooster in your flock, that when that hen, if she was hatched, if chicken A was hatched by a hen, she had her mom with her. Her mom hatched her out. When chicken A gets broody, she's going to hatch out her chicks and likely is going to be a good mom. So you want to keep track of that particular hen because you know that hen is going to produce, the chicks that you may want on your homestead, because you may not want to be tied to doing the incubator thing all the time. And, if something happens where, you lose power or what have you, you're not going to have to worry about that, losing your flock, or getting new chickens out of your flock. Because why? Because, the mother hen doesn't rely on electricity. So that's something that you want to keep track of in your record keeping.
Mm-hmm. And if you're like us, when you've moved to a new area, it's really good to take detailed notes about the weather. When does it rain? What are the weather patterns like for your area? Are there any bugs or varmints? For example, in our area, from time to time, we'll go out there in the morning and we've got some holes. Was that a snake? Was that a vole? What was that, right?
Likely a vole in our area.
In our area, we've seen that, right? Anything else that would prevent you from successfully growing on your homestead? Those are good things to note. And then you want to note when, how many, the holes, where they're located. Are they in your garden? Are they close by? And then what do you do, or what you did to rectify that situation? For example, did you have to use some, pesticides or something like that? So those are good. Hopefully not. Just depends. But so it's good to note those things. I think you mentioned a little bit earlier too, when you move to a new property, it's good to pay attention to things like the lay of the land. For example, with water, if you do get rains, where does that rain go? Does it pool up in areas? Where's the slope go? It's good to know that, because if where you're planting your garden is going to be downslope and it's going to be flooded, that may not be what you want. You have to think about some of those things, and you may have to make adjustments. And then to keep track of things like tool management. So, when did you purchase those tools? If you're in an area like ours and you buy things like rakes and shovels and hoes, are you buying them with wood handles, or are you buying them with fiberglass handles? The latter, the fiberglass handles, are going to hold up more in the heat. But if you don't have them, then it's a good idea to know, when did you buy them? You bought them 3 years ago or whatever, and you've got to maintain them. You've got to sand them down. Okay. You've got to use wax or whatnot to, maintain them and keep them up. Mineral oil, So those are good things to know, especially when it comes to maintenance. If you have equipment that has motors, like a riding lawnmower, a tractor, or both, when do you need to change the oil? What type of gas, what type of containers do you have? So for us, at least my preference is to have one of those more sturdy metal cans for storing gas, because You don't experience them buckling when you get the extremes, the heat and the cold. And then, how much do you keep on hand too? Especially with gas prices kind of going up and down and so on. And then, what do you spend on those things? The oil, the gas, and so on. Certain things like a powerful gas strimmer, what you want to call one of those type of tools. Some of them require a mix, a gas oil mix. So, they tell you, hey, you've got to use that because it doesn't have ethanol in it, for example, and it'll last longer. Some people might say, hey, maybe I could just mix that myself, but it might just be more convenient. Just buy what the manufacturer, says to use. And that is more expensive than just buying gas at the pump, but you'll maintain that type of equipment. So these are all important things to keep track of as well.
And then going back to animals, and dealing with livestock on your homestead, you really want to keep track of the health of your animals. So for example, with goats, when did you vaccinate them? When did you deworm them? When did you do hoof trimming on them? Have you looked in the inside of their eyes and judged the Fibonacci scale? Those are some things that you want to think about, and you want to make sure you are keeping track of when you do all of the health maintenance, you could say. The other thing is you want to make sure, sticking to goats as an example, you want to know when your goats are in heat. For example, goats such as Nigerian dwarf, the pygmy, and Boer goats, they go into heat every 17 to 25 days. And that's important to know on your homestead when they're in heat, because if you know when they're in heat, then you know when to breed them. I can't wait for us to have a male goat on our property, because then we'll know when we want to, breed our goats. But knowing when their cycle, their estrus cycle is super, super important. And then you also want to make sure that you're keeping track of all your expenses, especially when it comes to your homestead. I mean, obviously, you want to keep track of your other expenses, your heating, your cooling, your mortgage, if you've got that. I hope you don't have car payments, but if you do, okay. But you really want to keep track of your homestead expenses as well. Because right now the economy is a runaway train wreck right now. There's inflation. It's just, it's crazy right now.
Yeah. Inflation's a real thing, and it's easy to lose track of what you're spending. You got vet bills, feeds, supplements. So by keeping track of what you're spending, it's going to help you decide, do you need to downsize your herd or upsize, find another food source for your animals. One thing it makes me think of too is hay. You got to have a stock of hay for the winter. And the closer we got to, going into the winter season, the prices of those bales of hay kept going up. Mm-hmm. Don't know, with the way everything's going right now, is it going to go back down in the spring? Don't know. Hopefully. Probably not, right? They get you used to it. But anyway, so, it's good to plan that out and know, hey, I need to, buy X number of bales because that's going to get us through the winter. All these types of things are going to help you to, hopefully keep those expenses down. That's why it's so important too for record keeping.
And then by keeping a good budget, especially like where your groceries are concerned, and keeping track of what you and your family are consuming, because inflation, it's just, because it's out of control. It is so important as homesteaders that we know what our families are eating. I know it sounds crazy probably to some of you, but it's super important. And if you're like us, we have a very young family, so taste change. So, last year, I know for our kids, they were all about sweet potatoes. Everything had to be a sweet potato. This year, not so much. They're not crazy about it this year. But what they are crazy about, what they can't get enough of, is carrots. Carrots, potato, cabbage, and broccoli. Yeah. That's what our kids like to eat. So, I know that that's something that our family really likes. So when it comes time for the next gardening season, I will make sure that that is what I am focused on, is planting gobs and gobs of carrots and rows of cabbage and broccoli, and making sure I have at least 3 long rows of potatoes this coming year, because I think this is what December, and we're almost plowing through our harvest. So yeah, next year is going to be the year of the potato for us. And then of course, our family consumes lots of herbs. So, well, we are pleased to announce that starting in January of 2023, we will have downloadables on our website, and that's going to be for members only. And you'll be able to download these spreadsheets, what we're talking about here on this podcast today, which is record keeping. And the reason why we feel very strongly that record keeping is just super important, because it helps you run your homestead efficiently. And because the economy is so tight right now, and because money is tight right now, this is not the time to mess up when running your homestead. So the more efficient you can make your homestead run, the more money you're going to be able to save. So we're going to have several printables available based on livestock, based on gardening, based on budgeting tools, to help you guys run your homesteads efficiently. So look for that in January of 2023.
On the 2acrehomestead.com.
Yep.
Well, that's all for us here. So as always, we're thankful that you spent some time with us. Mm-hmm. So from our family to yours,
happy homesteading and be safe.